All right, how's it going? I wanted to make a little custom hook, a countdown timer hook. And the reason I'm doing this is I think this is a good challenge for you if you're learning how to use React, because it really stresses your understanding of how to create effects, how do references work, how do you make a custom hook and have it return some type of state that you can use outside of that custom hook. So I recommend you try to build this little countdown hook yourself, and then watch this video if you want to kind of learn more about how I would do it. Now, I would say that I'm not sure if I'm doing it the most optimal way, so if you have a comment, leave it and let me know a better way I can do this, short of just downloading a library that does it for me. But what we want to do is we want to have a countdown that starts at 5 and it goes all the way to 0. And when it hits 0, we want to invoke some type of function, right? So that sounds like a cool thing that you could put into a custom hook because it could be reusable in other pages or other projects. So let's just go ahead and make a hook up here called const use countdown. And let's think about the interface a little bit, right? So we need to be able to have it call an on function. And then it also needs to take a initial time. Okay, so if I go over here, let's just go ahead and call this. We're not really sure what the interface looks like just yet, but we'll figure it out. So we have a custom hook here, and I'm going to prefix that with use because that's just a convention we use for custom hooks. If the hook happens to have, or if the function happens to have like a use effect or use state or any type of the React hooks, then you probably want to do that. All right, so this thing takes in 2 arguments and takes in a callback when we're done. So let's just pass this a function. And I'll print out done here. And then what we also want to do is we want to pass in a initial time in seconds, right? In fact, we could say we could do like in seconds so it's more explicit. So now we have this hook that you pass a callback, you pass 5 seconds, and then when it's done, it should invoke this callback and print out done to our console. Now the question is what does this hook need to return? Well, if you think about the interface, it needs to return time left. So like I say, seconds left. And let's just try to print that out somewhere. So let's start implementing the logic here because obviously this thing doesn't return anything. So let's say return seconds left is equal to 0. We're just going to get this thing working at least. And then inside the hook itself, we're going to need some type of effect, right? Typically for a countdown timer, you're going to need a timeout or an interval. So let's just go ahead and say like use effect and go ahead and call that. And we're going to pass it an empty dependency array for right now. But what this use effect needs to do is it needs to set up a timer and then, it needs to set up a interval or you can set up a timer. It doesn't really matter. Maybe we can do both. So after 5 seconds, I'm going to say, let's just do set interval. So I'm going to say const interval is equal to use interval. And we are going to basically set up an interval that counts down every second. And also in the effect, we should return a cleanup function. So we need to say clear interval, and we'll pass it that interval function. And what we want to do is probably call this set interval and not use interval. So when this use countdown hook loads, it's going to invoke a mount effect that's going to only run once when the component mounts. It creates an interval that runs every second, and then when you leave the page or unmount the component, it's going to clear that interval. Yeah, that should make sense. And this is really stressing your knowledge of like effects and how you can return things from effects and wrap effects in abstract functions. So with this set interval, we need to somehow keep track of the time that we have left, right? So one thing that you could potentially do is you could use some type of state. Now let's try that out. I don't know if it's going to work 100% because we might have to refactor. So I'm going to say time left and set time left. And I'm going to set this equal to use state like this. And then I'll set that to initial time in seconds. And then every time we set that interval, I'm going to use a setter callback or a state set callback like this and just decrement time like that. But one thing that we want to do is we want to check if we're done, right? So actually, let's just keep this simple. I'm going to go ahead and just return time left. So now you'll see that it decrements like this all the way down to 0. And at some point, it's going to go into negatives. Now there's an issue because how do we tell this thing that it needs to call on done when it hits 0? So, I mean, one way you could do this is you could actually put an if statement inside of this setter which I'm not too much of a fan of. It seems kind of hacky. But unfortunately, this effect, it needs access to the latest time of time left, but you can't get that because of how the effect is set up to only run once with this empty dependency array. So there's different things that you could potentially do. One of them is you could put this inside the dependency array, but then every time time left changes, it's going to rerun and destroy this hook, which is going to clear your interval, which is not what you want. So the easiest thing I could think of is use refs. Whenever you need to have something that's like sitting around in React state, or not state, sitting around in React, and you want to like just hold on to that value, I could just go ahead and say like a time left ref. And then I'll just go ahead and go like this, equals use ref. And again, call me out in the comments if I'm doing something kind of dumb, but I'm also going to set this to initial time in seconds. And every time we decrement, I'm going to say new previous time is equal to time left ref current minus 1. So now we're actually going to use the ref to keep track of the time instead of state. And really all state's doing is just used so that we can have the app re-render. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and set time left to this. And then I'm going to say if the previous time is less than or equal to 0, we could just call on done. And then we also need to clear the interval like this. So I'll just go ahead and clear the interval. And then otherwise, we should probably, I guess we don't need to decrement anymore, right? We could just keep it stuck at, I'll do this. We'll keep it stuck. So for less than or equal to 0, then what we need to do is probably just keep on setting it to 0. Or we could do nothing. I'm not really sure. We'll figure this out. So now let's see if this thing works. So if we refresh the page, it starts at 5, it counts down to 4, and then it seems like it just crashes. Let me just go ahead and print out what this thing is. So this is printing out 4 every single time. So I think what I forgot to do is I also forgot to decrement the interval, right? So this thing could be set equal to 0, and this thing could also decrement, like, I'll just say minus equals 1. Keep this a little bit cleaner. I'll just say minus equals 1, like that. Or you could do a minus minus. Actually, this one has to be kept like that. All right, let's try it again. I'm refresh the page. It should start at 5. It should go all the way down to 0, and it should stop. And then hopefully it should print out a console log of done down here. Okay. So that's how I would potentially do it. You might ask, well, why you have to use this weird ref thing? Why can't you just use state? And like I said, like you can't get the current value of time left unless you pass it to here. But then you pass it to there, and your effect keeps on unmounting and remounting and cleaning up, which clears your interval and kind of messes up with like the timing, right? And really, you don't have to like, so technically you don't even have to have this in state anymore. What I could just have is a render function if you wanted to. And this could be just like a little hack where every time you wanted the page to re-render, I could just go ahead and pass this like a random symbol like this. I'll just do this, and I will actually pass this after the timer. And then instead of having this return a state variable, I'm going to have it return current. So let's refresh the page. And this one, again, should render down all the way down to 0 and stop and call the callback. Okay. So then the last step is we want this thing to be able to reset itself. So let's add a button down here. I'll call it reset. And we're going to go ahead and just add an on click, and it's going to call a reset button, a reset function that comes from this use countdown. So let's go ahead and make this interface return a reset function. And we're going to go ahead and just put a reset function here. So I'll say reset the function. And what this function needs to do is it needs to basically clear the interval out and restart it. All right, but all this logic is already like stuck inside of an effect. So if you wanted to potentially just reset it, we could just basically say time left ref dot current is equal to initial time in seconds. So down here, I'm just going to say this is equal to initial time in seconds, and that's going to reset the timer. Now, I also need to turn the timer back on, so I have to kind of run all of this logic again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put a start function up here, and let's just pull out a majority of all this, and we might have to bring in another ref. So I'm going to go ahead and say interval ref dot current is equal to this, And then I'm going to go ahead and just do an interval ref is equal to a new ref, like so. And then we can just go ahead and call start here. And then on the cleanup function, I'm going to say interval ref dot current is what we're going to clear. And then over here, we're also going to clear that ref. And down here, the whole reason we're doing all this is so that we can just call start again. And that'll reset the ref for the interval. And then everything should work fine. Let me make sure I name that interval ref. All right, so now it's counting down. You can see up here, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, prints out done. And then if I reset, it goes back to, actually this only went to 4. So we actually need to call like a render again, which is kind of a pain. Or we could just call render inside of the start method. Just to make sure, because again, the time left is not stored in state anymore. It's stored in a ref. So you have to actually like tell React to re-render. All right, so that's all I wanted to show in this video. Again, if you have a better way that you would do this, let me know. I was kind of trying to get it to work with just a use effect instead of having to do this interval ref stuff. But again, like I just can't for some reason figure out how to have it not like completely clear the interval and reset it. And it just messes up the timing and everything. And then with React strict mode, there's more things you have to like consider. It makes it a little bit more confusing. So I decided to just put the countdown of the time in a ref and just tell React when it should re-render. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed watching this, I hope you guys tried to do it yourself. I think this is a good learning opportunity to challenge yourself with React. And even if you implement it kind of a suboptimal way, you're still stressing your knowledge on effects, on custom hooks, on use effects, on states, and how you can use those custom hooks inside of parent components to kind of abstract away some logic and reuse them on different pages and different components. If you want to join my community and ask us questions, you can. I have a Discord channel where we can try to help you out with any coding questions you might have. And like always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, press the bell icon. Have a good day and happy coding.